How should you handle multi-position eligible players? How should you treat a player who is likely to gain catcher eligibility early on in the season? What position is the weakest this draft season? We'll answer these questions together with our corner infield preview coming up next on Beat the Shift. And welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me, as always, is Ruben Guy. What's going on, Ruben?
Not much. How are you doing today?
Okay, I said as always, although you were out last week on vacation. I hope that went well, and hope you're able to get back to New York, as there was a snowstorm last week.
Yeah, I mean, I was in Florida last week with a balmy 55-degree average there, which is much better than it is right now. Now it's in the teens and single digits here in New York. But yeah, we beat the snowstorm, so we got home and we were able to watch the 18 inches of snow fall right in my front yard and my driveway, which was just awesome.
Amazing, amazing. Well, I was here braving it. In Florida, it's going to be about 35 degrees in Miami this weekend, which is kind of crazy. Apparently, below 40 degrees, I don't know if you know this, but iguanas sort of fall off the trees and just roll over and play dead. Did you hear about this one?
I did not, but I do know that pitchers and catchers are in 2 weeks. I do know that.
Oh man, yeah, I can't wait for that. Best day ever is when they announce. Oh my God, it's the first intra-squad game, and you see a little footage of them pitching to each other. I love that.
Yep.
All right, well, we've got a fantastic show tonight. A regular on our show, you know him, Mike Gianella. What's going on, Mike?
Hey, how you doing? I'm doing all right. I'm in the same northeastern like weather vortex you are. So yeah, lots of snow last weekend, really cold. Looking forward to baseball, and it'll make me feel warmer, even if it's not actually warm yet here in the Northeast.
Well, that's what we're going to try to do. We're going to try to brighten up everyone's day across the country who's in this cold and talk some baseball. But of course, we always start our show with a strategy section, and we'll talk a little bit about multi-positional players. As you have some players who aren't just a second baseman, but they could be a second baseman, third base. You've got some crazy ones that are second base, third base, shortstop, outfield. I don't know if there's anybody who has 5 eligibilities, including first base. I'm not sure. Jose Caballero comes close. But anyways, question to you, Mike, to start it out is, what are the importance of multi-positional players? How do you value multi-positional ability, or whatever you want to call that?
Well, so the first part of the question, I mean, there's a few ways that they're valuable. First of all, the draft, they offer flexibility. Just to give a simple example, if you take Jazz Chisholm Jr., he's going in the second round roughly. If there's a run on third baseman, but plenty of second baseman available late, you have the option of shifting Chisholm to third or vice versa. If you draft Kettle Marte, he's your second baseman. I don't think it's that big of a deal that early, but it's something that can matter later in the draft. There's a lot in season. So in season, it allows you to cast a wider net for free agents. This is true, especially in deeper formats where you can be like, oh, I can take an infielder at any position, or I can take an outfielder. In season, in a league with daily or 2-time-a-week lineup moves like NFBC leagues, it gives you more lineup flexibility. I know from playing both in TGFBI and the main event the last 2 years, it was really helpful to have not one, but 2 players like that on the bench with multi-positional eligibility. It helps with matchups, helps with platoons. And then in trading leagues in season, it gives you more options in those like kind of old school deep leagues like labor that require like all roster spots to be covered for the trade to go through. So there's a lot of utility as far as that goes. Like as far as valuing them, it's kind of a more of a squishy question, but there's a lot of reason that those players are valuable and can help you out in fantasy.
All right, moving.
I think higher up in the draft and the auction, they don't. Their cost and what we value with them at isn't as high as it would be later in the draft. Like if you're in the very beginning, the values are what they are. Whether they're 2 position, whether they're going to game position, whether they're gonna, that doesn't mean that much to me. I'm looking for as much value as I'm gonna get. But later on in the draft, later on in an auction, you do want those guys to have that flexibility, so you don't get cornered. You don't later in the draft. You can only, let's say during an auction, you can't only nominate in a certain position because you have already stacked the corner infield or you stack the middle infield, or you don't your util spot is filled up and you have no space to move these players. So I think during the draft and during an auction, it's very important to leave yourself open to be able to draft certain players because they have multiple positions, and because so many people get hurt during the course of the season. Having these guys on your roster as backups, you can just plug in wherever you need to. They can become invaluable at that point.
Yeah, no, definitely. I echo both of your sentiments here. I mean, for me, in waiver wire leagues, to me, the biggest use of it is when it comes to the waiver wire, in that it expands the player pool that you can look at. So, if you're middle infield, the person that you have playing there has shortstop and third base eligibility, and then your third baseman gets hurt. Well, now for a replacement, you can look at both corners and middle infielders, because if you get a middle infielder, you can shift that player over to the third base spot and vice versa. So you get to look at more players, and if you get to look at more of the player pool, that player is more valuable. We didn't mention best ball, but best ball, it's even more valuable because you don't even know where the positions are going to play. And if your player has some kind of week, he might be better than whatever third baseman or whatever second baseman or whatever shortstop you have. Every single position that you add in a best ball league to your positional eligibility helps you even more. As far as valuing, really hard to say. I have not come up with an exact way, but to me, I generally put $1 more towards somebody who has positional eligibility in a waiver wire league that has a bench. In a best ball league, that to me is even more. It's like $1.50, a couple of extra rounds.
Well, actually, Ariel, I have a question for you. Do the ATC projections add value to the players that have multiple eligibility?
I mean, the projections are just giving the numbers. The way I evaluate players, I typically don't, other than I make sure I have X number of active players as second baseman, X number of active players as shortstop. So the players could be either or, whatever it helps more, and you would put them at the worst position. So third baseman, and we'll talk a little bit about what the best and worst positions are today. If third baseman is the worst position, you'll generally want to put somebody with eligibility at third, even if they have shortstop and third base, etc., etc. Do you find yourself, Mike, at the end of drafts or auctions trying to get a player, or is it just sort of a tiebreaker? Well, I could get this guy or this guy. Let's go for that guy because he has eligibility, or do you actually make it a point to get one?
I think it's a tiebreaker, but I would say it's a strong tiebreaker. Like put it that way. So toward the back of the draft, and I want to also say I agree with Ruvain, where at the beginning it's not really a big deal to me in terms of the value. Like I'm not looking at someone going, ooh, like I really value him. But later, yes, I do look at it as a tiebreaker, but a strong tiebreaker. So I'm looking at my roster and seeing where I might be falling short on depth or bench options. So, for example, like someone like Jonathan India, I know people are not excited about him. I can see why. I've got him a little bit higher than his ADP, maybe like a round and a half, because he's eligible at three positions in most leagues: second base, third base, and outfield. He is a projected starter. No, he's not a target. I'm not going to go out of my way to get him. But if I'm looking at the board, looking at my team and going, you know what? I don't have a player like this yet. He fills out three positions. It's just nice to have a guy like that, as opposed to someone with similar projected value who say outfield only, and I've already got like five strong outfielders. I'd lean Indy in that hypothetical.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would actually add one more caveat to that. It's a tiebreaker if you haven't already drafted someone who has multi-position eligibility. Because if you have just straight guys playing those positions, those guys are much more valuable to you if you don't have that availability at different positions. Because if you don't have it early on, you can make up for it later on in the draft, because the players later in the draft, later in the auction, a whole bunch of them have multiple position eligibility. But earlier on, if you have a couple of guys that can switch from first to third or first to outfield or third to outfield, whatever it may be, it doesn't necessarily have to be a tiebreaker for me later in an auction or a draft.
So, Mike, how do you value a player that is expected, or how do you treat a player that is expected to gain extra positional eligibility this season? I'll give you two examples that are a little bit different to talk about. Bo Bichette, who's signed with the Mets, he's shortstop eligible, but the Mets have Francisco Lindor, so it appears that he's going to be the starting third baseman, and he would gain that in the first week of the season. Then you have a player like Ivan Herrera, who qualifies at DH utility only because he doesn't have enough starts elsewhere, but he probably will gain catcher eligibility sometime in the middle, and that's significant because he might be a decent bat. How would you treat those players in a draft?
Well, it does depend on the player position. I probably, and I want to dig in a little more to see his health and timing, what he looks like in the spring. But someone like Herrera, that's where I am making a bigger adjustment and pushing him up. And I think the market's already doing that a little bit with Herrera, but I see that as almost having like a free kind of roster slot where it's like I can take Herrera at maybe a bit of a discount and then just take a catcher at the end and slot him in. With someone like Bichette, it's a little bit different. I think what I'm looking for there, somebody who's, say, shortstop and second base or third base and first base, that's not quite as valuable just because it's often just the difference between one corner slot or another corner slot. But someone like Bichette, who's going to be a shortstop, which is a middle infield position, and third base, which is a corner, I kind of value that a little bit more because it gives me some flexibility on my whole infield. So really, it's situational. But going back to what we're talking about, and Ruben, you pointed this out. And this is in my notes, and I agree with you. Someone like Bichette sort of saves me from picking players later just because I have to get that extra eligibility. So there is a little bit of value in that for sure.
All right, Ruven.
And especially when it comes to Ivan Herrera being the catcher eligibility, that's a big thing. I mean, how many people were on for Hunter Goodman last couple of years because he was outfield and catcher eligible? That was a huge thing. I mean, he's playing majority in the outfield, but he's actually catcher. A player like Salvador Perez, he's eventually going to be either a DH or a first base only, and they're going to slowly phase him out of as being a catcher. But that year, when they know he's going to be mainly a first base or DH, or actually they have Pasquantino, so he's not going to be first base, but let's say DH, then it gives him more value just because he's still eligible at that position for one more year. And I think it means more to him than a player like Bo Bichette. Bo Bichette, his value is intrinsic. He is who he is. It's not going to affect his hitting that much. You put him at the middle infield, you're going to pay whatever you pay for. It's going to pay the market for him. I don't think the market is going to go over crazy for him just because he's going to gain eligibility. It may affect your personal decision based on your roster construction, but I think it's more important when a catcher has multiple eligibility as opposed to a middle infielder going to a corner infield.
Well, the positional bump, the dollar value bump for a catcher could be like $5, $6, $7 in a 15-team 2-catcher league. The middle infield bump versus corner is nil pretty much these days. So it makes a big difference, the fact that he's a catcher.
Yes, and I think that's always something to look out for when you hear that a catcher is going to be playing first base more, or the catcher can gain eligibility somewhere else. It makes that catcher a little bit more attractive, even if they have not that great numbers. If they're going to move around a little bit, I think it does make it a little more enticing to pick up that catcher.
So I do have a small confession to make. When I was growing up, obviously I was always a Mets fan. But for a short period of time, when the Rockies first started, the Colorado Rockies, I did root for them. New team, exciting team, the Blake Street Bombers. They had a couple of guys who had 40 home runs. There was one year I think they had 4 guys with 40 home runs and 1 guy with 37 home runs. Andres Galarraga, Larry Walker, Vinny Castilla, and of course the fourth one there was
Dante Bichette.
Dante Bichette. Love Dante Bichette.
Yes.
And it's actually really exciting to me that Dante Bichette's son, Bo Bichette, comes to the Mets, comes full circle here. Oddly enough, one of the guy I really liked on the Rockies team was Andres Galarraga, which incredibly, one year, not for the Rockies, but I think for the Montreal Expos, he led the league in both hits and strikeouts. Is that even possible, Mike, anymore?
It would be really unlikely. The kind of player who strikes out a lot is generally going to be selling out for power and have a lower average.
Yeah, the big cat. And I'm not sure if he actually played a game with the Mets, Andres Galarraga, but the Mets actually did sign him, and he did play some spring training games. So it would have been fun to have Andres Galarraga on the Mets. That would have been awesome. But we got Bo Bichette now, which is really awesome. The Mets also had Eric Young Jr. for a little time, right? Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm. I do. Yeah. I'm also a Mets. I was also a Mets fan growing up, so I remember. I didn't remember the Galarraga thing though, but yeah, he signed with the Mets in December of 2024 that winter, but then didn't play for them in the majors.
Yeah, that's too bad. All right, moving on. I do want to talk with you about shallow versus deep. Like we say that a position, oh, it's really shallow, or a position is deep. And for me, I have two more terms: wide versus narrow. Mike, maybe what maybe you can tell us what your perception of shallow versus deep is, and how that matters in terms of how you play fantasy.
Well, I think sometimes it's a little bit overstated because really your goal is to fill your roster with the best stats that you can. And Raven, you kind of made this point earlier in the first few, or you made part of this point in the first few rounds. I don't care that much. Like I look at it like, well, I'm just trying to fill out my team. I'm trying to get the best stats. I think it's later on where that shallow versus deep matters. Like second base, for example, I don't think it's a top heavy position, but it is a deep position just because there's so much eligibility there in terms of who can play there. So that does change my strategy a little bit as far as being like, okay, there's six second basemen I like going outside the top 200. I don't have to target one. I don't have to start looking at a floor. I don't have to start worrying about the draft. Whereas other positions, catcher you've mentioned is the obvious one. That's one, particularly in a two catcher league, you really have to think about. It's shallow. There's a cliff. There's a place where you're getting less, not just in terms of stats, but in terms of plate appearances. You have to really think about how you want to populate your team so you don't either wind up with, say, 350 plate appearances from your second catcher, or sometimes worse, like someone like Patrick Bailey, where you're getting plate appearances, but maybe getting a batting average penalty.
All right. What about you, Ruben? Anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's very important that you have a list of players that you want to get in each of the categories you consider as shallow. Because once you get to that cliff and you jump off that cliff, you remember this is a 6 month season. You're going to be living with that lower tier player on your roster for 6 months as long as he stays healthy. And the fact that a position like third base can be so shallow, it sort of changes how you want to do the draft. Whether you want to put more money in a different position, whether you want to play in the medium size of the pool or the high side of the pool, it really changes how you want to construct your whole roster, especially if you don't want to play in a certain level of a position.
Yeah, and I'll add in, the terms wide and narrow. At some point, somewhere lower down, you might have a range where the values go $10, $9, $8, $7, $6, right? That would be pretty narrow. That it just, sort of comes to a line, and everyone just drops off precipitously. And then you can have a wide position where you come to a point where there's like seven players that are $5, $6, right? And that makes a difference, because when there's a number of players at some point that are of the same value, you don't have to struggle early on to get a top heavy person. No, I need a really good second baseman. If there's going to be a ton of second basemen at the same price later on, like the position widens, and then it doesn't really matter. You'll get somebody, right? As opposed to a very narrow position where if you don't grab the $10 guy and four more guys go, all the way you're down to a $4 player, right? Because of the narrowness, you might have to pony up and get that guy before the others do. Do you agree with that, Mike?
Yeah, I think that intuitively makes sense. I wouldn't have phrased it that way, as wide and narrow. And honestly, when you were asking that question, I wasn't quite sure what you were getting at. But yeah, that makes perfect sense to me, particularly because you can have runs at the back end of a draft, especially as opposed to an auction, and you could find yourself in that position. And I think this is where projections and valuation are important. You can kind of see, to your point, like where those valleys are. That'd be another term to use, where it's like, oh boy, like I see a valley here. I don't want to settle for somebody who's worth $2 or $3 at the position, just because, like, oh, I skimmed here, I waited. There is certainly a point where you can hit that trap where it's like, ooh, I'm getting this player. And I think even worse than what Ravain is saying about being stuck for 6 months. Somebody gets sent to the minors or goes to the bench, and in a deep enough league, you're just blowing, like, week after week or every couple of weeks. You're trying to blow fab on players, and there's just no replacements there.
So last year we saw that the third base position was actually the most shallow of any position aside from catchers. Traditionally, or at least maybe 10 years ago, we saw it used to be like second base or shortstop even. But we saw a very different thing last year. Has that continued, Mike, or do you think that third base is still the weakest position right now?
In my opinion, it's still the non-catcher, two catcher league position, yes, at third base is still the weakest in my opinion in terms of how there's some talent at the top to be sure, but it falls off. And I've heard this term used for starting pitchers the last couple of years. There's really like a blobby kind of group, like after the first top few options.
So I see, and if I use my 15 team 5x5 valuation, with standard positions and all, the 20th third baseman is worth $6. If you look at the other positions, the 20th first base worth 9, the second base 10, the 20th shortstop is 12. So that's actually a much deeper position. Yeah, third base is the most shallow. If you don't get a top one, you are going to be fishing sort of in, $4, $5, $6 range. So I agree with that. Do you disagree, Ruvain?
No, I don't disagree. And the issue with having a cheap third baseman like that in the lower tier is that you want to get some power out of your third baseman. You want to get some RBIs and runs. If you're getting those guys at the lower part of the tier and you miss out on the big chunk of the, I think there are a total of 10 players according to ATC that have a $10 value at third base. If you don't get one of those guys, you're not going to get the counting stats at a position that you really need the counting stats, unless you want to go after an upside guy or a guy who's or you are sure that you want to go after a guy like Bo Bichette who will gain eligibility, and then you can always slide him over. And because you said that the middle infield is so heavy and it's not shallow, maybe you can finagle a way to get a middle tier middle infielder and be able to move Bo Bichette over to third, and then that solves your problem, that type of thing.
Yeah, to me, if I'm drafting Bo Bichette, I'm actually drafting him in the intention of putting him as my third baseman. And what I do in my rankings is I actually include Bo Bichette if I believe that he's going to be a third baseman. I include him in the third base pool when I do my valuation of the actual dollars. But when I list them, and I list them in at third base, I put a star at third base. So I'll list him as shortstop/third base star, just to denote that, yes, he's going to be a third baseman in value that way, but remember, he ain't a third baseman yet, so just to signify that. So this is our corner infield episode. We're going to talk about first baseman and third baseman all together. We always set the stage here, and just to preface everything, if you hear me talking about a number, a dollar value, that is, again, the 15-team 5x5 valuation. We got to pick a standard, so that's what we do. What I see in the player pool is the very top is Jose Ramirez. He is super elite. There is nobody else of him. He's, a $40 type player. Then there's a pack of $30 players that are overpriced in auctions from what I'm seeing. But, in a draft, you don't have that kind of dynamic. You take the best player. So for me, I might be taking a very high-priced corner in a draft, but I probably won't in an auction. And you've got guys like Caminero, Nick Kurtz, Harper, Pete Alonso, and Jazz Chisholm. Then there's a nicely priced hotspot of par value players at about 20. We're talking like Freeman, Devers, Matt Olson, maybe even include Miguel Garcia and Austin Riley that are sort of at value. Not many corner infielders in the $10 to $20 range, but there's a hotspot of corner infielders in about the $6 to $9 range, and then again at the very bottom, 1 to 2. So for me, planning-wise, in an auction especially, I want to buy a $20 corner. That's my strategy, if I can, at a reasonable price. And then either a $6 or a $1 to $2 corner infielder, one of them, and then buy a second one, and whatever bucket fits, whatever makes sense. Drafting, of course, is different. If you see Junior Caminero and it's the right spot, you grab him because he's the best value. A little bit different in drafts. Mike, what are you seeing in the player pool for corner infielder this year?
I mean, what I see is very similar. I think there's, Ramirez, to your point. I was looking at this just separately. So the only two players last year with 400 plate appearances or more in the top quintile, top 20% in all 5 categories were Ohtani and Jose Ramirez. That's just amazing to me that you're getting like an absolute like 5 category stud at third base. Like there's value in that. And then for sure there's a drop off after that. I don't think these players, I'm thinking more of a draft than an auction. I don't think these players are that overpriced, but I do agree with you. Like people are kind of pushing that next group of players up a little bit just because I think they're afraid particularly at third base at the bottom. What I do see is there's a big cluster of first basemen that I kind of like going in the second tier, like Harper, Devers, Matt Olson, Josh Naylor, if you believe he's going to run. Like just players, they're not way undervalued, but this is a solid place where I think I wouldn't mind taking my first baseman. And looking at Ramirez, whether it's Naylor, whether it's even a Jazz Chisholm, if I shift him to third, I think I want to get some speed from one of my corners if possible, particularly if I can do it early. If I can't, that's fine. I'll shift elsewhere. But that's where I think I might pay up, like in the top like 50 or 75 picks. And then yeah, after that, there's kind of a middle, but the cliff, and we've talked about this already, the cliff starts earlier at third base than it does at first. So I think something I'm going to be trying to prioritize this year, if I can, is getting two first basemen, putting one at my corner, and then getting one third baseman.
Anything to add?
Yeah, what I noticed is that the middle tier, like the $10, the $12 corner infield players, a lot of them are younger players, and a lot of them have a little bit more upside or possible upside or possible downside with them. You have like a Michael Bush, yeah, or Tyler Soderstrom in that range over there. You got a Spencer Torkelson who had a great year, but he had a bad year the year before. You have a Kyle Manzardo a little bit lower. This is at first base. At third base, it's if you look at the top of the list, at the top of the players, the two youngest guys I'd see on the list are Caminero. He's like otherworldly, and he could have an MVP type season. But you also have Jordan Westberg, who's he's not great, but he's like a $15 player. He's serviceable, but he's one of the younger guys on this list. And you look at a guy like Caleb Durbin, a young guy. Also, there's some players on third base that are and first base in the middle tier that are younger that could have some higher upside, but also have the risk of having either a sophomore slump or a second year slump.
Ruvain, I want to go to you for this question. Are there any specific stats that you feel like you need to get from the corner infield position?
Yes, and I touched on this before. You want power, you want RBIs, you want runs. You're not looking at batting average. You're not. I'm not. I don't need the batting average there because there are a lot of batting average players in the middle infield or even in the outfield. But power, you're looking for, especially at first base. You want to get a slugger. You need RBIs. You're not looking for stolen bases in that position. I think those are the main things you're looking for. And everything else you can. Usually, people go to middle infield and outfield for stolen bases, and the prototypical first baseman slugger. You want a Pete Alonso on your team. You want a Kyle Schwarber. I know he's a utility, but you want that type of person who just slugs, who just hits home runs, who has the RBIs because he'll get the runs also, and that's what you're looking for at corner.
Agree, Mike?
Yeah, I generally agree. I don't try not to push for stats too much in any position because I prefer to push for value. So if a speed guy is there, I'll take him. But generally, I do like to get my power at the three-corner infield slots. Ideally, if I can get one big bopper, like 30 plus home runs early with a lot of like RBI and run production, that's what I want. Some sort of power from all three corners. And I do want to avoid, like, I don't want to take if I'm taking an average risk or hit, it's going to be on one player at most. Zero would be ideal. I do try to value average, but if there's enough power tied to a player, Ruvain mentioned Schwarber. There's so much power there that someone like that, it's okay. Like I'll take the potential average hit if it's going to come.
All right, so let's get on to our ATC undervalued players. These are players valued by the ATC projection system that, compared to the market, looking at some ADP, AAV info, appears to be a bargain. Now, we don't always agree with it. We don't always agree with ATC, but ATC bubbles to the top some potential bargains. If ATC says that a player is way overpriced by $7, I don't even look at him. Or at least I shouldn't say I don't look at him. I don't need to go to the deep dive. I want to deep dive and see the players that I might potentially buy first. I never cross off a player, but I want to spend my time studying players that could be a bargain. So let's go through the corner infielder ones, and starting off with Freddie Freeman, who is no stranger to this list. Mike, what are your thoughts on Freddie Freeman? Is he a bargain to you?
If he stays healthy, yes, and I know he's done that in the past. I'm just starting to get a little worried. Like one, about the fact that yes, he's had over 600 plate appearances, the last two seasons. Yes, he's generally healthy. He's just at an age and reaching a point in his career where these nagging injuries are going to start impacting him more and more. There's already reports of him, dealing with some like aches and pains, and we haven't even started spring training yet. I mean, he's not off my board. He's Freddie Freeman. He's solid. I just don't necessarily. I think he's fine at his price. I just don't necessarily see him as a projection bargain. I think this is something projections tend to do, where they tend to bake in for older players, that kind of regress model going back, like, that 3-2-1 sort of weighting. And it's a little bit hard to see the decline. Like, if Freeman gets under 500 plate appearances this year, I just wouldn't be shocked by that. I think that they're the Dodgers. They're going to be some load management with him as he gets older. They want to keep him fresh for the playoffs. They've done that before. Solid at this price. I just don't necessarily think he's a bargain.
Okay, Ruvain?
I think he's a middle type bargain. I mean, I'm not thrilled with him because of everything that Mike just mentioned. He's getting up in age. He's 36. This is his 16th MLB season already. That's crazy to think about. I remember when he was first coming up. Last season, he actually walked less, he struck out more, and he hit more ground balls, which is a little bit concerning for an older player, because older players are consistent until they're not, and you don't know when that drop off is going to be. But he's very consistent. He's a 22, 23 home run, 90 RBI guy, that type of guy, because he plays in that lineup. But he does play for the Dodgers, and the Dodgers will do load management. And I could see him playing less games just to keep him fresh, because he's had problems with his ankles and legs and everything like that. Yes, he's a great defender, and they'll keep him in for that reason. But at the same point, they may give him the extra day off here and there, so you may lose some of those plate appearances.
Yeah, I remember when he first came up, and Ruvain, I think you and I were in a local auction back then when I think we were both living in Queens, and one guy had $20 left at the end of the auction. Nobody else had more than like $8, and so he goes, $20 Freddie Freeman. Problem though is it was a keeper league. So by putting the 20, you basically cancel all his value for the following year. All he had to do was say 8. It was not a fab reclaim league, so that's what I remember from Freddie Freeman back then. That what in the world did you do? Bad strategy. Play on that. Anyways, Freddie Freeman. Yes, I mean he used to be a $20 to $30 player. He's now a $20 player. Not much upside over that. But again, he holds value, and if healthy, I have no doubt he'd be pretty much what he's been the last couple of years, aside from the stolen bases. I don't think he's going to get to double-digit steals at his age. Forget about that. Now, the batting average concerns me. He used to be a 300 batting average player, but his strikeout rate has been creeping up. He had a over 20 strikeout rate last year, which was the most he's had in quite a long time. He's usually around 14, 15. And his BABIP was 342 last year. So he actually ended up with a 295 average last year, despite chugging up in strikeout rate. But it was BABIP aided. I don't think he's the 300 hitter anymore. I think he's more like a 275 hitter. But with that 275 projection and with 540 at-bats, he is a $20 player according to ATC. So again, it's really injury concern. If you have a more stable guy at about the same price, I'd rather them. But if Freddie Freeman is the cheapest option of similarly priced corners, I have no reservations about taking Freeman if it's, an extra $1 or $2 cheaper. Because right now, on average, he's like par value or $1 bargain. Okay. Next player on the list, and he's been on here multiple times as well, Yandy Diaz. Ruvain, why don't you go first? Yandy appears to be a $5 bargain in the mid-teens, which is actually quite a lot at that level. What's your take?
Yeah, so let me sing the praises of Yandy Diaz, okay? He's a career 290 hitter with a chance of 17 to 20 home runs. He bats either leadoff, first, second, or leadoff, second, or third in almost every single game. Every season he's played, he's done better in the second half than the first half. That includes higher batting average and more power in the second half when compared to the first. My only concern with him is that he hit 18 of his home runs last year at home. But they're playing back at the Trop. When he was at the Trop, he never hit more than 12 home runs at home during the course of the season. So I like his batting average. And if you're not going to pay up for like just a batting average guy, he's a guy that can stabilize you at first base. If you don't want to spend that too much money, he can stabilize you at first base with some batting average. He'll throw in some power there, but I do have a little bit of concern of a little power drop because they're going to be playing at the Tropicana again this year.
Yeah, so ATC has him for 20 homers and a 290 average. 290 sounds right. To me, the 20 is a little bit high, being that he is going back to the Trop. But remember, this is based on projections, and projections do understand that he is going to a different field. So they are baking that in. Again, I will take the under on 20 for homers, but again, he's a $5 bargain in the mid rounds. Batting average is a position that it's hard to find later on. So, and he's batting first and second, as you say. So that's 75 runs, maybe even 75 RBIs or so. These are stats you can bank on, and at that kind of bargain, even if he only goes to 15 homers, which would be almost a low for him in a while, it's still a bargain. And he's uber stable. He's got very low projections volatility. So I have no problem buying Yandy Diaz at that kind of thing. Usually I'm doing something else at that price point, though. So it's not like I have to rush to get him because there are options later, and I typically will get an earlier option. But if I haven't gotten a first base option, Yandy Diaz is on the table for me. Mike?
Yeah, I really agree. I love players like this. I'm a big fan of batting average. There's something fun about him is going back to 2022, and looking at first baseman. He's second in WRC plus. Freddie Freeman's first, and of course, like Freeman's better. We know that, and Freeman had the steals, particularly in that span. But Yandy offers so much in batting average. I think my only other concern besides the power is just contextually. I look at that lineup. I worry a little bit about runs and particularly RBI. If they are going to go with Gavin Lux in front of him, and a Chandler Simpson and a Nick Fortes at the bottom of the lineup, the RBI might not quite be there. But the value's here. There's just so much value in that batting average that even if he only hits 15 home runs, I think this is a good price for him. And to your point, it's just really a roster construction question at this point of, if you've got other stuff going on, if you already got another first baseman, maybe you don't pull the trigger on Yandy. But if you haven't, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to take the average here and just take the 15 home runs as opposed to a big time bopper, it's perfectly fine to do that.
To me, this game is not one with, this guy is really going to have 40 homers this year. I know it. This game is about knowing what to do with a projection, knowing what to do with a market value, and saying, hold on a second, let's stress test this. Okay, so you don't think he's going to have 20 homers. He's only going to have 15. Okay, so now he's not a $5 bargain. He's a $3 bargain. Still a $3 bargain, right? I stress test, and I play devil's advocate. What if this is wrong? What if this is wrong? And then is he still a bargain? And then if he still is, then yeah, I'm interested. It's more about knowing what to do and how to construct the roster and when to take a person than it is about the players. And again, if you're using ATC is never going to have an outsized projection because it's an aggregation. So if you're using ATC, you got to play, okay, is he still a bargain? If he performs a little bit under, what's the right way to play? All right, moving on. Very similar player, to be honest, is Alec Burleson from the St. Louis Cardinals, who has first base and outfield eligibility. That helps. Very, very similar. I mean, I have him projected for a 267 average. Not as good a batting average as Yandy, but still very positive. 20 homers, which that's probably more likely than Yandy, and a half dozen steals. Nice amount of runs and RBIs as well. Small bargain, not as big a bargain as Yandy. And to me, I think I play him the same way. If he drops a little bit more in price, great. If you like the position eligibility and you don't have a first or outfield yet, that's a great spot to take him. Again, he's just a producer of stats. Gives you some base of runs and RBIs. Gives you some base of everything. Very well categorically spread, which is what you want. His dimension, the ATC dimension, which shows how spread out in category, he's 4.2. 5 would be the max. So mid 4-dimensional player, very, very handy. And projections are really tight. ATC volatility at 2.7. Projections pretty much agree. So I think Alex Burleson is fine. Nothing fancy, not, oh my God, I got to get him. But to me, he's an option. Mike?
Yeah, I don't like him as much as Diaz, but I do agree. Like he's an option. He's kind of underrated, although I have noticed his ADP is creeping up because people are noticing the same thing about him. Probably the concerns I have here, again, like lineup context. Last year he was okay against lefties. Before that, he hasn't been. So I do kind of wonder, as a full timer, if that'll impact him. If they do plan to play him against both lefties and righties, or he slips into some sort of platoon. And then the other piece is, yes, the average projects well, but last year he hit 290. If you're banking on that, I think the like 270, 275 bandwidth I roughly see on the projections is a fair assessment, which is good, but it's not necessarily like an average wow. It's more of a, oh, this is a solid, positive average contributor. So yeah, solid all around player, decent at his ADP. I'm more excited about Diaz, but yeah, Burleson at his price point is fine.
Yeah, totally agree. Ruben?
I can actually see a little bit of upside here also as well. I mean, he mentioned batting average. He's a 268 career hitter, but his launch angle has changed every year. It's gone up a little bit every time, and he's hitting more fly balls, and he's pulling the ball more. He's going to bat in the middle of that lineup. Yes, that lineup's not going to be that great, but you're still batting in the middle of that lineup. You're going to get the RBI chances. He's going to hit for power, and if he can just get a little bit better home run to fly ball rate, then there's a possibility that the 20 home runs can turn into 25 or even 30 home runs.
All right, so you see some upside, so that's interesting.
Yes.
There. All right, well, before we go on, it's time for the Injury Gurus Trivia of the Week.
All right, so this trivia is going to be based on the next player we're going to be discussing. So, Mike, I think you're going to know one of the answers, and Ariel, you'll know it too. The trivia is, in 2025, there were 7 players in MLB who had 120 singles, not hits, but singles, last year. 7 players, 120 or more singles last year. Who are they?
Well, is one of them the player we're going to discuss, Luis
Yes,
Ariz?
Yes,
Okay.
Luis Ariz led the majors in singles last year with 139.
Okay, well, that was the obvious one because we know we're going to talk about Luis Ariz. I am going to go with Miami's Xavier Edwards.
Xavier Edwards was third on the list with 131 singles. Mike?
Let's see. I'm trying to think of somebody with a decent average. Nico Horner.
Nico Horner was number 2, one single behind Luis Ariz with 138. Ariel, let's keep it going.
I'm going to guess Yandy Diaz.
Yandy Diaz, he was up there. He was tied with another player with 120 singles last year. You're missing 3 more players.
Yeah, this is where it gets tough because you have to start thinking of players with good averages, but not too many home runs.
That's correct.
Let's see. Stephen Kwan.
Stephen Kwan, number 3 on the list with 129 singles. If you notice, the common thread here is contact hitters. So, Ariel, you got 2 more to go. Let's see if you can get them.
Can I try Bo Bichette?
Bo Bichette just fell out. He had 118 or 119 singles last year.
This is hard. I was going to guess Bichette too.
Nah.
Average might not be high enough, but J.P. Crawford.
No, he did not make the
Okay.
list. The final
Okay.
2 that I'm looking for are Trey Turner. He had 126 singles, and Bryce Terang tied Yandy Diaz with 120. So the common theme here is contact hitters, batting average, getting on base, and that's what Luis Ariz does. He doesn't have a team yet, but you know what you're going to get with him. It's not like if you move into a different position or move into a different field, he's going to be different because he's going to still get those singles. He's going to get you. He's going to get on base. He has a 314 career batting average. He just missed getting second base eligibility. He played 14 games at second base last year, and again, the crazy thing, he only struck out 21 times last year. Just also the 2 other players we mentioned, Stephen Kwan, he struck out 60 times, only 60 times during the entire year, and Nico Horner only struck out 49 times. So this is the epitome of contact hitters getting on base and batting average. So if you want batting average, this is the guy. And by the way, this is the 3rd year in a row that I did a trivia by Luis Ariz.
He had a crappy year, and he only batted .292. His strikeout rate, 3%. 97% contact rate. That's crazy. Luis Ariz, he's going for $2, the 20th round, and he's worth about $10. We see this every single year with him where he appears to be a big bargain. The problem, though, with drafting Luis Ariz is that you put holes in a couple of your positions. A couple of your categories, that is. He's a 2.4 dimensional player. He's going to get you not that many RBIs, almost no steals, although he did get 11 last year, and he's going to give you like 4 homers. So it's kind of tough to roster him. because he just fails there. So to me, in a draft, he's like, well, I've got plenty of RBIs and homers. My average stinks. Guess who fits my team? Ba-dum-ba-dum, Luis Arias. So he goes later to me in drafts because it's just harder to use him, right? It's about usability. But for auctions, I think you can work your team a little bit better with him. So you can take a chance at Luis Arias. I think he'll be costing a tad more if you look at AAVs in auctions. Again, it's hard to dispute value. He's produced $15 to $20 of value each of the last 4 years. I mean, what can go wrong that takes him from 15 all the way down to 2, which he's going at a $2 value? It's just so hard to pass up. But again, if you're in a league that has no trading like the NFBC, hard to use. If you're in a league that has trading, then yeah, you can use them quite a lot more. It depends how big your reserve list is, right? So it really context dependent on whether you want to use them or not. But and you might actually be getting a bargain right now also because he's unsigned. As soon as he signs, he'll go up $2 extra, so he'll double in market value to 4, right? You'll lose $2 on that. So to me, if I'm drafting now, Luis Arias, if you don't have a baseman, go for it. He'll make it to a team with 97% contact rate, right, Mike?
So here's the thing. I love the value around the rise, and probably even more emphatically than you do. I do agree you can't pay the full sticker price, but at this price, he's a no brainer.
I know.
The only problems I see there's two problems I see, which is one, as a real life player, he's declined. Like, so when Luis Arias was a 3-4 win player, or it was like a 2-3 win player, he had value to major league teams. He's now about a 1-win player. There's a reason he's not signed, and it's not just because he's one-dimensional batting average, because all these components factor into a player who's also lost his defensive utility. The second problem I have, last year, he hit 262 against lefties. And, the year before that was better at 271. The year before that, he did hit lefties. That's some of the problem. If a team signs him as even on the good side of a platoon, now you've got a one-dimensional player who's a platoon player. I'm not saying there's not value in that, and I think my plan with Arise would be to grab him a little bit earlier than this, and in a league like NFBC or a league with benches, like kind of cycle him in, cycle him out. I would be wary of assuming he's going to be a full-time player for a major league team. I don't think that's a guarantee.
Interesting. Will he gain possibly eligibility? Like maybe a team signs him for second base and then he's more helpful?
He could. I just also, I think that's part of the problem with him though too, is that it seems his defensive utility, teams see him as a first baseman and maybe even a DH. So he could. And to put a caveat on what I said, like, I could be wrong. Like, if a team like the Rockies signs him, like, well, what the heck? Like, we're just going to play him. We don't care about this stuff. He seems like a perfect, like, second division player where a team signs him and be like, you know what? We don't care about any of this. We're just going to sign him and let him play. And if he hits an empty 300, so be it.
And at $2, you can take that risk. If you don't like the context, right? If you don't like the context where he signs, okay, you spent $2, so you cycle in somebody else. And by the way, if he does sign with the Rockies, that that bargain where he's a $10 player, that's golden. So I think he's a cheap ticket. Ruben, do you agree?
He's also a great trade chip. We're all in GDD together. I drafted him. I drafted him last year, and I traded him because I didn't have a need for batting average. So I traded for a team that did need batting average, and you know what? It works out. If you're in a redraft league and it's a trading league that you're in, he has much more value to you because a team that's doing well or is trying to do well and they need help with batting average, they have these catchers who are hitting 25 horns or batting 200. They're perfect fits for them and they're perfect trade partners, and you can actually build up your team and get something for him in later on in the season.
Yeah, that's a good point. The one-dimensional category players, saves, steals, and for him it's batting average, they're actually easier to trade and they're more desired to trade in trading leagues. So the value in trading leagues goes up, right? So that's a very, very good point. All right, moving on. This guy has been on this list every single year, and he's on it again. Alec Boehm of the Phillies. Now, a couple years ago, he turned in a $15 season, and the next year his ADP cost him $8. Then he turned in a $20 season, his cost went to $12. Then he turned in a $20 season, his cost went to $12. Okay, last year he only had a $7 season, but now his cost is $2 to $3. 18th round for Alec Boehm. And to me, I think he could get to 20 homers, possibly. I think that he is a solid 270, 280 type hitter, which again is valuable at the corner position and valuable in drafts because it's hard to find guys late with batting average. Um, the guy just keeps making his bargains. He keeps making his value. No Bo Bichette in Philly, so right now he looks like he's going to get a lot of playing time. To me, it's a slam dunk for value, and again, he's really cheap. So if I'm missing a corner infielder, he's one of the guys I'm really interested, as I am every single year. Mike?
Yeah, I don't really. I understand why the price is down after last year. I don't understand why it's down as far as it is. Like it just
I
seems,
know, I know.
and this goes back to what we've been talking about with some of these players. Notice there's a theme here. Like average is a category. Even if you don't think Bohm's going to hit 20 home runs, 15 is a realistic target. A 15 home run hitter with a good average, and if the RBI like bounced back even like halfway between like what he did last year and what he did in 2024, great context. We know what the Phillies can do. We know what that lineup's like. I think people are really sleeping on Alec Bohm. Like this is a nice cushion player at the back. If you miss one of your targets and you're like, you know what, I'm going to wait on a third baseman. I'm just going to take somebody later. I think Bohm's a nice player, particularly if you have your power shored up. And to your point, it's not even like you're taking like a 5 home run hitter or someone like a Rise where it's like, oh, it's almost a 0 in power. You're getting some power. So it's not a 0 in the category. Yeah, I really like this price. And your point about a job, Aiden Miller is not quite ready yet. So even if the Phillies are thinking of a trade or thinking about either moving Miller to third or moving Trey Turner to third, I don't think that happens this year.
Yeah, and forget about last year. We only had 60 RBIs. He had almost 100 RBIs the 2 previous years. So if he's going to be starting hot, we're going to have a lot of people to drive in. I mean, he's essentially Andy Diaz with 10 to 15 points less batting average. He's going in the 18th round at a very weak position at third base. It's a slam dunk for me. Ruben?
I like his price point right now, and he's a definite buy for me at this point. But there's some things that are a little bit concerning for me. His launch angle has gone down every year he's played. His ground ball rate has gone up every year he's played. His fly ball rate has gone down every year he's played. The Phillies almost signed Bo Bichette to replace him. So the Phillies are not. I mean, he loves Philadelphia, and they had the whole thing with the fans and everything. But the Phillies seemed like they were almost done with him because they wanted to sign Bo Bichette to replace him, which is a little bit concerning to me. He's turning 30 this August. My thing is, if we see his launch angle in the beginning of spring training and we see his launch angle in the beginning of the season start to go up, that will be a good thing because that'll show he's looking for more power. Because usually as corner infielders get older, they tend to get more power. They tend to, get on base with more with walks, getting a better eye, batting average, and with power. If you don't see that with him, and this trend of his launch angle continues to go down, and the ground ball rates continues to go up, I'd be a little bit concerned with him and with his playing time even later in the season. I can see if the Phillies are in a pennant race that they can maybe trade it to get a third baseman to replace him even down the stretch.
All right, right back to you, Ruvain. Our next player, Jake Berger, who was a 30 home run a year player, but then had a down season and an injured season this past year. Are you okay with his injury concerns? And is Jake Berger, who's going in the 19th round for a perceived $6 bargain, is he worth it to you?
Yes, he is. I'm upset that he lost his third base eligibility. He's first base only now. His power numbers dropped. His home run to fly ball rate changed a little bit when he changed stadiums. He showed more power in Miami and more power with the White Sox, but also he had the injury like you mentioned. He's hitting more fly balls than ever in his career, and his hard hit rate has been stable basically his career around 49, which actually would be in the top 30 of baseball if he had enough at bats for the season. He had left wrist surgery, so I think that this is if you have a wrist injury that affects your power. So I think the fact that he tried to play through it a little bit and then he had had surgery, I think this could be a bounce back year for his power.
Okay, Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, he's solid at price. I have him a couple of rounds, like a round or two ahead of where he's going, which I think is like in the like two high 270s, low 280s. Yep, streaky hitter. If you draft him, particularly in a deep league, you're just going to have to live with the fact that he's going to have a month here or 6 weeks there where he does practically nothing, and he's going to have a month where he doesn't quite carry your team, but lots of power with an okay average when he's hot. The one thing I'll kind of say against him is that Texas, it very sneakily has become a pitcher's park. I think people don't realize this, but you look at his home run splits. I don't know if he likes hitting there necessarily, just not necessarily comfortable with the venue. That's been true for other Rangers. They've said that. So I like him. I see him as a power source. I pretty much agree with Ruvain. I don't think I'm quite as optimistic, but at this price, yeah, I'm fine with him and kind of taking perhaps a batting average hit for a pretty good power bonus.
So here's the way I play Jake Berger in auctions in 15-team league, where I see he's $7 on my value sheet, but he's going for like two. I'm happy to own Jake Berger as my corner infielder for $1. But I don't really want him per se because he definitely has a lot of flaws. Texas not good for him. All the things you guys mentioned. So to me, it's a strategy and game theory of what to do with him. I like nominating him a little bit earlier in draft. We call it the Joey Votto nomination. It's where Joey Votto on our sheet is like, wow, $6-7 bargain. I don't really want him. So you nominate him earlier so that you put him up for $1. You're happy if you get him for $1. But then the bidding goes 2, hopefully 3, maybe even 4. And then you collapse the bargain because at that price point, you want more than just a $3 bargain. But if it's early enough, then you just, $3 bargain is not much at the $4 level. So that's how I would play him. I would actually use him as a nomination earlier because I don't want him. Cross him off my board. Great. I'll take a different corner. There are other corners like Bohm who I want at the same price point. So Berger is somebody I just don't want. But I'm happy to get for $1. What the heck? Sounds about right?
Yeah, I mean, from a drafting theory standpoint, I think that makes a lot of sense, and you make a great point, which is, saying, and particularly at auctions, like saying somebody's a bargain. So in mixed leagues in particular, like in an only league, obviously that doesn't really happen. Maybe somebody on your sheet for 2, 3, 4, if you're lucky. In a looser league goes for 1, but in a mixed league, you see it all the time. You see players like at 5, 6, or 7 in your valuations going for $1. So you're absolutely right. Like there's no reason to pay someone like Jake Berger up to his par price. But if he's out there late and you can get him for $1 or 2, great. If not, there's plenty of players out there I think you can get for a similar value.
Yep, exactly. Obviously, in the shallower leagues, then he's off my board or just a bench option. In deeper leagues, well, then, you have to decide whether you like him, and I don't like him as much as others. All right, moving on. Mike, we got Nolan Schunel, who just signed the deal. Angels first baseman. ATC only projects him for 510 at-bats. That could be low. So I have him at about a $1-2 market value, but worth $6. I actually think he might be worth more because I think the playing time is underestimating his playing time. But again, he's not somebody that I particularly love. His output reminds me of Josh Bell from a couple years ago. Maybe a dozen homers, half a dozen steals, 260-ish average, some decent runs or RBIs. So a contributor, happy to get for $1. But again, same boat as Jake Berger. I'm just not all that thrilled with him, but happy to get him as a last-minute option if I can.
Yeah, this is a boring deep league, like especially AL only. But maybe in deep mix, this is a boring kind of last corner option, maybe even a bench option. I think one thing I like about him, to your point, is he is going to play. Like the Angels are committed to him. Also, unlike some of these players we've talked about, he's a lefty, but his splits against lefties and righties are just about even. So that's a really good.
Yeah.
That's a really good sign to me that they're not going to sit him against lefties because he struggles against them. And he's only like 24. So I'm not saying there's a lot of improvement here, but I could see room for him to get a little bit better, particularly in power. So he's fine. He's not a target, but if he's my third corner, particularly at this price point, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, and Ruvain and I were going over players before this episode of corners, and we're like, and Ruvain's like, 500 at bats, you think that's low? And we're like, well, maybe he's got some kind of split problem. We checked the split. There is no split. So that further emphasizes why we think that the at bats are low. Right, Ruvain?
Yes, and also the fact that the Angels committed to him so early on in his career. He's only turning 20. He's turning 24 before the season starts. This is his 4th major league season already. So he'll hit around 260. He'll give you maybe 12, 13 home runs. But his home run to fly ball rate last year was 8%. And every year in the majors, his fly ball rate has gone up. So there's a possibility that those 12, 13 home runs, as he matures, can turn into 15 to 17 home runs, and you can actually get a pretty good bargain at this level.
All right, final 2 players. We can do them together. Miguel Vargas and Andrew Vaughn. Any thoughts, Mike?
I think Vargas is fine. It really is going to come down to, like, surprisingly, with the White Sox making some of the moves they've made, he has to produce. Like, their offense suddenly looks kind of crowded. Lennon Sosa is projected to be on the bench, which is really interesting to me. I think he'd actually start on a lot of teams. So Vargas just has to come out of the gate strong. Something interesting that in looking into Andrew Vaughn, he had a really like great run there for the Brewers, but then he kind of slipped a little bit. And I noticed in September he wasn't quite in a full platoon with Jake Bowers, but he was losing some at bats to him against righties. So that's a concern with me for Vaughn. I don't think he's going to fall into a full platoon. I think he gets like 75, 80% of the at bats at first base, but I don't think he's quite a full timer. So if you're looking at this price thinking, oh, yeah, I'm going to get another 600 plate appearances, I don't think the Brewers play it that way. I think they sit him against tougher righties, and Bowers gets those at bats. So he's okay, and he's okay in a lineup with like bench slots and like NFBC or daily lineups. But if it's a league with weekly moves, just be careful. I don't think there's quite as much volume here as people might be expecting.
Yeah, Ruven?
Yeah, I'm going to start with Andrew Vaughn. Andrew Vaughn, if you look at his splits are very interesting. First half of last year, he batted 206 with 7 home runs. Second half of the season, he batted 300 with 7 home runs. He beat up lefties, so that's good, and he hit more home runs and he hit more for power at home. Well, what I found very interesting, and I did when I did a deeper dive, is that he hit 281 with nobody on base. But when people were on base, he only hit 224. So is he an RBI guy? I don't think so. But he's a guy like last year he was completely undervalued. I think ATC had him like a $8 or $9 value, and he was only going for a buck. It wasn't even being drafted that much. So you can get the value here. And with Miguel Vargas, he's striking out less. He hit 50%. He had a 50% fly ball rate last year with an only 7.6 home run to fly ball rate. So there's a possibility with some upside there. He had 16 home runs and had 6 steals in 138 games last year. But I think that he had a little bit of a disconnect when he joined the White Sox because he was so upset about leaving the Dodgers, and maybe he's finding, if he's a little bit more relaxed in Chicago now, the lineup may be a little bit better as well. So you may get, I think there's a little bit more upside in Miguel Vargas as opposed to Andrew Vaughn.
So Andrew Vaughn, he had an 18% strikeout rate and a 7% walk rate last year. That's pretty good. You wouldn't expect that from him. I mean, he has been a consistent 20-ish homer per player. Again, I think he is lower down than anybody else we've spoken to so far. Not opposed if I need a little bit of power jolt. I think he is who he is. He has $10 upside, but more likely he'll be like a $3 to $5 player. So again, he's a bench player to me in a mixed 15-team league. Miguel Vargas, I saw him in person against the Mets last year. He was the most impressive guy on the White Sox. I really liked his hit tool, even though he does not really hit for much average. But he does walk a lot. He gets on base. He does have a little bit of power speed blend, so he's more interesting. I think he has more upside. I think that there's room to go up in homers and stolen bases. Maybe he'll get to the 20 homer, 10 steals mark at the very top. So he's got more upside. So I'm way more interested in Vargas as opposed to Vaughn. And he has dual first, third base eligibility. So, again, he's just another corner option at the end, probably for my bench. But I'll take him a tick over Vaughn, a tick below some of the others. Anyone else to mention that we haven't, that you're interested in, maybe lower down in, DC range and, deep leagues, corners? Anybody, any names to throw out, Mike?
I mean, there's a few, and these are really, really to your point, like deep league options, and I'll just touch on them quickly. Like Connor Norby, like 15-15 potential. He was hurt last year. He's going to play. Like I don't see anyone else challenging him in the Marlins. He was a prospect once upon a time. I already mentioned Jonathan Indy. I don't think we need to go into him like that much more. Down year last year, but typically an on-base guy. Good lineup is projected in some models to be toward the top of the lineup. I could see a lot of runs. Someone I one other name. Sungmin Song signed with the Padres. I know he's 29 years old. I know he put up numbers in Korea. No, I don't expect him to be a 2020 player with a 315 average like he was in Korea, but I think the Padres are going to play him, and I could see him similar to Norby being more like a 15-15 guy if he gets full time at bats. And again, at the price point, his min right now in NFBC over the last 50 drafts is like 377. You can just add a player like this for absolutely nothing. And if he doesn't work out, like who cares? You just throw him back.
No, great suggestions. Ruvain, anybody to throw in?
Yeah, I got two guys. Maybe you can catch lightning in a bottle with Nolan Arenado for half a season. This is very deep. I mean, he's going to be the starting third baseman. He's not going to get you a ton of at bats. He didn't really play that well last year. He batted 237, and his power's down. He's not the Nolan Arenado of old, but he is a starting third baseman. So if you need a starter, he's the way to go. And if he plays half a season, you get a half a season out of him. That's great. And another guy I want to mention is Willie Castro. Signing with Colorado makes him very interesting. He's a steals guy. He gets stolen bases. His batting average isn't that great, but he's eligible almost all over the place. You mentioned him before. He's eligible at second. He's at outfield, third base. He's eligible all over the place. And if you want a guy with multi-position eligibility, like we talked in the beginning of the show, he's a guy you can plug in and you can hopefully get some stolen bases. And he's playing in Colorado. What's not to like about playing in Colorado?
Yeah, well, you mentioned Arenado. I actually will mention a possible replacement for him, Blaze Alexander, who might fill in for him or anybody else in the Diamondbacks infield. Got some power speed potential in him. Good fill-in. He was a good fill-in late last year as well. Mark Vientos / Brett Beatty. Check an eye on what they're doing in the spring. We know that the Mets do still like them, and if they get into some playing time, they might make an impression. I like Josh H. Smith to cover some stuff, or when Corey Seager gets injured, because he always does. Javier Baez. Javier Baez is interesting to me. He's got third base, shortstop, outfield eligibility. That's a late pick, and you never know. He's shown it once in his life. And a little bit higher, actually. Kyle Manzardo didn't make our cut of the list earlier, but good power. This could be like a 35 homer source. And power is hard to find in the waiver. So Kyle Manzardo, if you need power late in drafts.
And you mentioned actually Brett Beatty and Mark Vientos. Both of them are third base eligible, but both of them are going to be playing some first base, probably along with Jorge Polanco, who's also going to gain eligibility. And the Mets actually are toying with the idea of putting Brett Beatty in the outfield as well. Now, if he can repeat a little bit what he did last year and a little bit more, he can have multi-position eligibility like we're talking about, and he may be a better value than what he's going for now.
All right, Ruvain, injury report. What say you?
All right, so we're going to stick with corner infielders here. I'll start with Austin Riley, who had abdominal core surgery back in August of last year. He is expected to be ready for spring training, no problem, so don't worry about that. Mikael Garcia suffered a strained hamstring while playing for Tiburones de la Guerra in the Venezuelan Winter League in December.
I'm a big
That's something
fan.
to watch for. You're a fan. I that's why I mentioned the team. Shout out to the team. That's just something to watch for. I mean, when someone who you have for speed has a hamstring issue, that's always something to watch for. So just keep an eye on that. Tristan Casas of the Red Sox said 2 weeks ago it would be a tight squeeze for him to be ready for opening day. Casas added that doctors have told him that a typical recovery for the patella tendon surgery that he had is about 12 months, which would actually make him have his season debut around May 1st. He's been rehabbing in Boston's spring training facility in Florida and hopes to play in some spring training games, but he may not be ready until later, which is why the Red Sox traded for Wilson Contreras. Caleb Durbin, I mentioned him earlier as well, the Brewers, he had arthroscopic elbow surgery on October 30th. His elbow was bothering him toward the end of the year, but he's expected to have a full recovery and be ready for spring training. And Isaac Paredes, this is also in deeper leagues. Astros general manager Dana Brown said that Paredes will be a full go to start spring training. Brown said at the GM meeting that Paredes wasn't fully recovered from his right hamstring tear during the course of the season, but now it seems like he should be okay with no limitations when spring training opens.
Well, Mike, it's a great show always when you come on. One of our favorite guests to have on to go through some of these valuations. And thanks so much for coming on the show. And why don't you tell everybody where we can find your work and all things Mike Gianella?
So I'm on social media. I'm on Blue Sky at just Mike Gianella. That's Gianella. You can find me there posting about fantasy baseball and other things. I am at Baseball Prospectus. That's baseballprospectus.com. I'm writing 2 columns. I'm writing a Deep League AL report for position by position, and I'm also doing an ADP report position by position. I have my own podcast with John Hagelin, Flags Fly Forever. Right now, that's also once a week, and we're doing a similar thing you're doing. And the Baseball Prospectus Annual is coming out this year, and I have an essay about the state of fantasy baseball that's actually at the front of the book. So if you do buy that book, and I do encourage you to do so. It's a great resource. Has coverage on 30 teams, excellent analysis. The team essays are done by like some really like famous and people who know about baseball and some really famous cool people. So it's kind of jazzed to have an essay in there about fantasy baseball alongside some of those writers. So look for the BPI annual when it comes out sometime next month.
Amazing, and always thank you for coming on the show. Ruvain, what about you?
You can follow me on Twitter X at MLB Injury Guru, where I'm going to tweet out the injury updates as they come, and they should start coming in a couple of weeks, especially very fast when the pitchers and catchers start to report. You can also catch my writing at Rotoballer.
All right, and I'm Ariel Cohen. You can find me on Twitter X at ATCNY. You can find my work over at Fangraphs, over at Rotoballer. ATC projections are up on Fangraphs, Rotoballer, RotoWire, Yahoo Sports. You can actually use it right in the software. And we're also going to be in Chris Clegg's product, The Dynasty Dugout. So check that out. Chris does a really fantastic job. Check it out, The Dynasty Dugout. All right. Once again, thank you so much to Mike Gianella for coming on the show. And from all of us here at Beat the Shift, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.